What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Next Deal podcast. As always, we are here to help you find your next deal. Remember to like, subscribe, follow, and give us a 5-star rating on either Apple or Spotify if you're enjoying this podcast. It really helps us grow this and get this out there. I'm your host, Justin Dossie, along with our co-host, Vince Hall, and today we're joined by Jeff Shahusky. Jeff has been involved in real estate for 19 years, has done over 2,000 deals, so much so that he's actually lost count of that exact number from what he told me. And a quote that Jeff put in his intake form that I really liked is that he loves to coach people on the things that most gurus skip over in their courses, and he loves to fill those gaps in between. Jeff, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing today?
Doing fantastic.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's almost
Thanks for
Christmas
the
break
intro.
at the time of recording this, so I'm excited. I'm ready for a long weekend.
Yeah. My wife's trying to get me to take Friday off so we can have a 4-day weekend.
There you go. Yeah.
It sucks because I'm resisting so far.
That's understandable. I know. I've got all my kids are at home. The winter break started today, and I'm like, I feel like I shouldn't have to be at work, but I'm going to be at work anyway because I've got so much stuff I'm working on before the end of the year. But
well, my wife is famous for her homemade caramels and some other stuff that she makes, but it really sucks because I have to be the stirrer. That's why I'm resisting. And standing in the kitchen for 3-4 hours straight, really, yes, it's
just
it hurts
stirring.
Let me send you my address for some famous caramels.
Oh man. Well, that's awesome. I'm super glad you're able to hop on, Jeff. Kind of just get started. Like, I know we chatted a little bit right before here, but how'd you get into real estate? You know, you've been doing it for a while. I'm kind of curious to hear what your story has been and how you've got to where you're at now.
Well, it's actually my wife's fault. So what ended up happening is, I met my wife, we're dating, we get engaged, we go through the whole process, everybody else does. And we decided to gift ourselves as our wedding gift a house, except we were going to build it and self-general it. Right. So fast forward through the process, everything goes well. But now we're flat broke. Like I couldn't afford to buy a TV set. I couldn't afford the rabbit ears to put on the TV set when we bought it. Right. It really sucked. We were just broke for a long time. And so when it took us about 5 months after we moved into the house to get our first TV together as a couple. And so because I could barely afford the TV, that also means I couldn't afford cable. I couldn't afford satellite. I couldn't afford anything. And so I just had the rabbit ears and I got all of 5 channels. And one of those channels is PBS. And it just so happened, my wife and I are sitting in bed, we're flipping channels, and Robert Kiyosaki's on PBS, helping them do their fundraisers, right? Yep. So I hear about the exact same thing that countless others have heard, right? We all start with the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, right? So I got the book, I bought, I was broke, so I actually couldn't afford to contribute to PBS to get the course that he was giving away. So I went on to eBay and I found one used, and, so I bought it. Quickly realized, though, that I could actually go through the course, learn what I needed, then put it back on eBay and get my money back before my credit card bill came due. Because remember, I said I was broke and I couldn't afford to pay for a lot of stuff back then. But it was really my wife that when we saw Robert Kiyosaki, she's the one who said, I think we could do this, and I'm like, really? What do you mean we could do this? And she's like, I think we could flip houses. I mean, what the hell? We just built this big thing. We managed to pull it off. You're pretty handy, and I'm a really good foreman to drive your ass.
Yeah, there you
go. Because she's a pretty good driver, and so my wife got it all started, and then I just got obsessed with learning it, and just couldn't get enough courses, couldn't talk to enough people, couldn't go to enough RIAs. I just loved the whole process and got addicted super fast. And, now you fast forward 19 years and I'm still loving what I do and still love helping people, and, been blessed enough to now be in a spot where I can, do stuff like this with you guys and just give back to the community.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's cool that she was the one that kind of brought that up to you. I know for me, I had almost the opposite, where I was like, hey, we should do this. My wife was like, I don't know. I don't know anything about flipping. I don't know that I really want to do any of that kind of stuff. And it's, you know, it was more of a me convincing her over the years, and for her anyway, and for people that are listening too, if you have spouses like this, I totally get it. But like, she wanted to see the proof first, right? Like, that was
Yep.
kind of her first thing, is I need to see that it works, you know, before, whether if it was just coming to do this business or another business or our real estate investing side of things. But for her, it was always like, well, I want to make sure it works first, right? So that's really cool that she's the one that kind of brought that up to you, and like you said, the foreman who can kind of push you and make you
Mhm.
do what needs to be done, which that's kind of cool.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
I'm in the same boat, with Susie. She, she's been a salon owner for 15 plus years, and she's gotten to a point where she's like, I'm on my feet all day. I use my hands every day. Like just the the constant like of owning a salon, the things you have to do, and she's like, I'm just ready for a change.
Hmm.
So like, for her it was kind of like, I know this can be done. I see you in action. I see Ryan, I see Justin, I see all of you guys doing all of these things, and it just makes sense. And so yeah, having your spouse on board is super important. And you're right. They're the ones that are going to, at the end of the day, kick us in the ass and keep us moving forward.
oh yeah, and it's pretty much exactly it. And and I know all three of our stories are pretty similar to probably most people. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many people I've talked to over the years, whether it's the woman who wants to come into real estate, it's the husband that's dragging his feet, or it's, the husband coming in and the wife's dragging her feet. It happens to almost all of us. I just happen to be lucky that my wife is the one who kicked me and said, "You're going to go do this." Although I will tell you, my wife has never been active in the business. Or even
Okay.
though she was the driving force, it was really more of not we could do this. It was more of a you could do it.
You can do this.
I will cheerlead you the way.
That is
She's like, we've
exactly what
got this
happened.
yeah, house we built. We want to put things in it.
Yep. Get out
Here's what
there.
we could do.
Yeah. You go do that so I can get some couches and,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh
yeah, a
man,
lot of
that's
fun.
so funny. That's so funny. So let's talk a little bit about like at the beginning with you starting deals. Like, did you start
Mhm.
out at the beginning primarily flipping, or were you wholesaling? Were you buy and hold? Like, how did that start for you?
I really started as a flipper. Um, the whole flip thing back then, I really hadn't even heard of wholesaling. I mean, Robert Kiyosaki doesn't really talk about wholesaling, or at least he didn't 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, he talked about was, build up passive income,
Mm-hmm.
except I'm an ex-financial advisor and an ex-IT guy. So math seems to be something that I'm pretty good at.
Yeah.
And, when I looked at the whole passive income thing, there are a couple things that started to click for me, but I had to figure out how I could get to do the passive income, which is why I started with flipping. The passive income for me registered really big time because as a financial advisor, we're trying to help people save a ton of money so that they can someday hopefully retire.
Right.
But when I read the book, I asked one question that most people don't ask, which is why do we need the number, right? And back 20 years ago, it was $1 million to retire.
Yep.
Why did I need $1 million? Well, because you're trying to convert the $1 million into monthly income so that you can continue your lifestyle, right? And
Right.
that's why it registered with me when Robert Kiyosaki said the stuff, because it made me realize that I could pick one of two paths. I could pick the traditional route, which is save, 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 and invest for the next 50 years, which is what everybody does,
Yep.
just so that, when I retire, maybe I might have a $10,000 a month lifestyle.
And that's
Or
on the high end.
right,
Yeah.
and that's on the high end for most people, right?
Yeah.
And you know, or I could sit down and figure out how can I just make 10 grand a month. And making 10 grand seemed a lot easier than making a million,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I picked the
Oh,
10
yeah.
grand. But I didn't really know how to landlord. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. It was still a pretty new concept, but I'm pretty handy. And so, I could swing a hammer and cut boards and, hang drywall and do electrical and, all that stuff. So I started out flipping. Back in the day, one of the things though, that of course you don't really understand and realize is that everybody's having the same problems you are. Right. And so the first problem I had to get over was my own fear of doing it.
Yep.
I ended up hiring a coach, spent $1 gazillion on it. My wife was not she was on board actually to get the coach, even though he was really, really expensive. And it was a coaching program where they actually flew to wherever you lived and spent days on the ground with you.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so I paid somebody to do that because I was stuck. I was really struggling to find good deals. I was struggling to run numbers. I was not doing a good job anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I remember I flew the guy in. And the first day, Regan was his name. So first day, Regan sets me down and we just kind of have more of a study day. Right. Let's just go through the stuff. Let's look at MLS listings. Let's just practice on deals, right, of what we're going to go do in the field. Day 2, we go out in the field. So I had scheduled a realtor. We go through all these houses. Regan's walking numbers with me. He's telling me how to do all this stuff. And about the 4th or 5th house of the morning, he starts asking me questions, like, what do you think? And so I started answering. By noon that day, I asked him one single question, which was my aha moment that made me realize I really could do this and do well at it. Was when now that I'd actually seen somebody else walking the numbers, looking at the same things I was looking at, and I could see it through his eyes, I said, is this all there really is to it?
Yeah.
Right. And I remember asking because he looked at me funny and just says, did you think it was hard? I'm like, I did. Like, I'm clearly making it a lot harder than this.
Yeah.
And so he spent 3 days with me. Those 3 days, I bought 5 houses.
Wow.
In those 3 days out shopping. Right. And
Yeah.
Regan got me over my fears. Now, my wife was enthused about having a coach right up until that moment, because that also was the last time I ever talked to him.
Okay.
And the reason is because I realized it's not that I didn't need coaching because I should have stayed with him. It was a mistake. But I allowed my arrogance and comfort at that time to go, you know what? I get it. I don't need this anymore. I'm just going to go do deals.
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought it was a great idea because all 5 of those houses paid for Regan and then a whole bunch more. And so we made a bunch of money.
Yeah.
But not finishing the coaching and not figuring out where all the gaps and the holes are held me back for a bunch of years. And I now know it. I didn't at the time, but I do now.
Yeah, that's I've been there because I've done the same thing with coaches in the past too. Like when I was younger, starting out, like I've only been in business for myself for like 6 years now, but there was some where it was like pretty short lived because I was like, I don't feel like there's anything else you can teach me really, and there definitely was. But I like what you said at the beginning. There is like a big reason people don't start, and like if people are listening to this, like, and you're on the fence or you're not sure what to do, like a lot of it is just self-doubt or you're not trusting yourself, and that's what a coach is great for. Like I don't think I'll ever not have a coach now because it's someone, the way that my coach explained it to me is he's like, I don't really do anything. He's like, all I do is find out what your goal is, help you realize you can actually do it, and keep you on the same path, and make sure that like if this is truly what you want, you're working towards that, and this is always where you're going. And it's for me, like the big thing I used to run into, and I still do, is like I just always doubt myself, right? Like I maybe could do that. I don't know. Like maybe it'll work. I'm not sure. When really it's like I've been doing this for 6 years now. Like I've learned a ton over the years. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things that I always kind of come back to, and that's when I'll chat with my coach and be like, I don't know why I keep doubting myself. And he's like, look at what you've already done. Like you know what you're doing, right? And it's having that extra person there is absolutely crucial.
Yep.
Yeah, I've feel like my whole life, I've never been prepared or qualified to do it. I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Right. So right out of high school, I joined the military, and I didn't want to do just anything in the military. I wanted to do something awesome. And so, I joined psychological warfare, but was terrified that I was going to fail, that I wasn't going to be able to do it, until I just got this mindset of like, no, I have to do this. I am going to do this. And then the same thing happened too and Justin, I might have told you this before, when my kids' school, they went to a private school, they needed a science teacher and they couldn't fill the void. And so I said, I'll do it. And I remember the headmaster's like, do you have any teaching experience at all or anything? And I was like, no, but I will be the best damn science teacher that this school has ever had. And so I got trained, I went in and I was like, I'm going to do this. And then I come to Justin and Ryan, to work with you guys. And I was like, I don't know anything about real estate, but I'm going to do this. And I'm going to be the best damn person at it. And that's kind of my mindset of like, when I go into things, I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure out how it's going to work. But at the same time, staying humble enough to know there's mentors, there's coaches that have been there and had the experience to kind of walk you along the way. And that's what's been really beneficial in all of those places, is having those people to essentially help me be the best,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that stuff is all critical. And,
Yeah.
The coaches in our life, they don't necessarily have to be paid people, right?
Yeah.
They can just be people that we meet at the RIAs. They can be friends that we meet along the way.
Yeah.
But coaches and mentors come in all kinds of shapes and varieties. But they're all super critical to our success.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great point too. Cause I've got like, I guess you could call it almost like I don't call it this, but like kind of like a board of advisors, right? Like if there's something going wrong either in my business or in my life, or I don't know what to do, whatever it is, like there's probably 3 or 4 people that I'll reach out to every single time. I pay one of them. The other 3 I don't, right? Like they're either partners in something, they're a friend of mine that is heavily involved in real estate. And it's a great point to make. Like networking at those events and stuff I've probably learned more from the people in those that I've become friends with over the years and seeing what they're doing than just trying to learn stuff on my own.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like when you go to the RIA, and don't take this the wrong way, because RIAs are super valuable, and the topics that they teach, even if they bring in a paid speaker who's selling something, it's ridiculously valuable.
Yeah.
But the most valuable time that there exists at a RIA or even at a conference is right after it's done.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It's that networking opportunity. It's going to lunch. It's going to breakfast. It's going to dinner.
Yep.
It's going to the gym and jumping on the treadmill next to somebody and chatting it up while you're just, doing life.
It's so funny. We recorded a podcast yesterday and that exact topic came up too. Like, I don't remember if we brought it up or the guest brought it up, but it was same thing, right? Like I love paying to be in groups. I learn a lot from those groups, but all the magic happens afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, coffee, we'll do cigars, like with people if they like cigars, or, go to the beach, whatever it is. But like, that's where the fun stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm obviously in a different place now than I was when I was, beginning, but
yeah,
I'm a firm believer that paying to be in the room is a valuable thing to do.
Yeah.
The caliber of people that you get to associate with, the ideas that get generated, the connections. I consider myself to be an above average smart guy, but that doesn't really truly mean anything, because I don't have the answer to everything in the world just because I think I'm smarter than other people.
Yeah.
That could just be my ego and arrogance too. I might not be half as smart.
Yeah.
But the reality is that regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, you've got to have connections that you can make phone calls to, or Facebook groups that you belong to, or some other online association, or the RIAs, right? But you got to have a place to be able to go ask questions and get them answered if you really want to grow.
And paying to be in those rooms too. Like the way I've always seen it is when you're paying to be in a room and someone's way more successful than you are, right? Like they're where you want to be. Like they know that you care and you paid to be in that room. They'll tell you anything you want to know. Like literally, like any problem you have, like, hey, you're doing 10 times the amount of business I'm doing. How? Like, how did you get there? And like, you'll get good actionable stuff versus like, you might not get the same as going to a RIA, right? Like,
Yeah.
where there's, hundreds of people there sometimes, or Facebook groups or things like that. Like, you'll get tidbits there, but actually paying to be in the room and putting your money where your mouth is has been where most of our like explosive growth has come from, is because we're going to those events and just seeing how other people think is something that's always fascinating to me. Because Vince, I'm actually not sure how you grew up, but like, we grew up like middle class, like maybe not lower middle class, but like pretty much middle class. Like, we weren't poor, but like, we also weren't going on vacation 3 times a year, right? Like,
Right.
it was always we had what we needed, but that was about it. And it's like, we weren't, it started for me when I was younger, working with my dad, doing like home security systems for people, and like going to do it at a $5 million house. And you're like, huh, I wonder how this person thinks. Like,
Yeah.
what is their thought process like to be able to have this house, right? Like, that's why I love being in those rooms.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And my dad's a retired credit union president, right?
Okay.
And so on the surface, that sounds like he probably made a lot of money, and probably in his day, because mind you, he's been retired for a long time. So back then, it was good money for back then. But my dad had a ridiculously conservative mindset, which is really more important than what his job was or what kind of money he made, because his conservative mindset is what established our way of thinking as a family. As it turns out, my wife's dad is also a retired credit union president. Never met
really?
them before they both retired. We didn't meet, but
That's funny.
There is some irony in it, and it's not just the fact that the two dads are both shared the same career. The irony comes in that the book of Rich Dad Poor Dad, that's actually literally our two dads. One dad doesn't talk about money; it's taboo. And the other one, which I happen to be lucky because I'm in the more rich mindset family than my wife's family is. It's not like we ever like compare paychecks or anything crazy like that, but we still talked about money, and we talked about careers, and we talked about goals, and we talked about different things. And, then I met my wife, and I thought it was normal to actually talk about stuff. And then I got my hand slapped really, really quick by my wife saying, yeah, we don't do that here. Like you have to change your language. And I'm like, huh? I don't understand.
No, you need to change your language.
That's what I thought, and unfortunately my father-in-law just recently passed, but in the 20 years that my wife and I've been married, that dynamic has changed in their family considerably because I've refused to stop talking about it, and it's not like I'm trying to choke it down their throat or make them believe what I believe. It's just, if money is part of the conversation, somehow I just don't shy away from it. Right. I don't run and hide like the rest of the family does. Well, now her brother was a financial advisor, guy that talks about money for a living, now talks about it with the family. Right. Another brother talks about it, and he's super cheap and super private, but he'll talk about stuff. My father-in-law was talking about stuff, estate planning things, all the stuff that goes with what we need to do and learn and grow with as we all, do more in the space of real estate.
Oh yeah.
I certainly didn't grow up talking anything about money. So, we ate like grilled cheese and ramen noodles a lot. That's, how
we did that too.
Yeah. But, I'm teaching my kids, Justin, you saw the board, my kitchen, with their allowance, and, they get a weekly
I still need
allowance,
to implement that.
and, they get deductions for leaving crap around the house, and, it goes into a red, and then they can earn it back. It goes to a green on their allowance. The two older kids, for Christmas, we've actually gone through Venmo, and we've gotten them some debit cards. So we're teaching them even more on, here's how to, manage your finances, how to spend well, how to save well. We're, going to talk about, some investment type stuff. But like, I didn't grow up that way at all. Like, I got to a point in my life, and this is no lie, like the way that I saved money is I duct taped the crap out of a shoebox and I put a little slit in the top of it, and I would just stuff cash in it.
Mm-hmm.
And because I know I would never rip that box open
So
until
it's
a
going to be a
rainy
pain
day.
to open it.
Yeah, because it's going to be a pain to open it. And I remember one
Yeah.
time opening that after I just was stuffing money, it couldn't even hold it anymore, and I had like, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000 worth of like ones and fives and 20s and kinds of things. But that was my mindset of like, this is how you save. Also, get a mason jar and go bury it in the backyard. So
Yep.
like completely different mindset when I grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were kind of similar, where it was like it was just I think it might come back to just like, I don't know if shame's the right word, but it's like, it's almost like if you don't have a ton of money, you don't really want to talk about it, right? Like
Mhm.
some people don't, right? Like that's
Yeah.
how we grew up, where it was like, how much is this? Oh, don't worry about that. Like I remember asking specifically, like, how much is the mortgage on our house? Because I was just curious. I was like, it's got to be, like it's it's probably like $1,500, but at that point I'm like, that's an ungodly amount of money, and it's like I couldn't really get an answer, and and it's been cool for me, like running businesses and changing that narrative with our
Mhm.
kids, and like to where I'll show them our P&Ls, or even just like make it real simple and like show them like our Stripe transactions for the day or for
Mhm.
the week, and like just to spark those conversations with our kids of
Mhm.
like, how do you do this? Like, how does that work? And kind of like start to have them think a little bit differently and seeing different amounts of money that some people don't get to see, and we're very, very lucky and blessed to kind of see how things have grown over the years. But it's, my oldest is 13 now. And, now a couple times a week, he's like, hey, what'd you guys do today? Like, where are you at? And, he's starting to get more and more questions of like, how
Mhm.
does this operate? Like, how does money kind of work? Like, and kind of helping them think a little bit differently. So it's been really cool to kind of like see that difference change, because my dad grew up without a dad, really. So like he didn't really have anybody to give him that. And so to be able to see that change, like just in a generation, has been really, really cool to see. Like all three of our kids now are like,
Yeah.
how did today go? Like it's a cool thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I grew up with, I feel like I grew up with the right mentality to talk about money. We still grew up eating mac and cheese and ramen noodles because my dad was so conservative with money.
Okay.
Um, we never talked about investing though. Like that was never an option. My dad retired because of all the money he saved in bank CDs,
Okay.
not because of what he had put into a 401k, not because of the stock market in any way, not because he had ever invested anything. My dad was so afraid of everything.
Mm-hmm.
All we talked about financially was, okay, this is how you make money and this is how you save money.
Yeah.
Right. But the coolest thing I ever saw somebody do, which was a friend of mine did, every time that he would do a flip and, when the property would pay off, like when he would sell it, he would take the closing statement home and review it with his kids, particularly his oldest, because she was the one that could sort of grasp what was going on.
Right.
But she still had no idea what a dollar was. So let's say you're going to make $20,000. Well, what's $20,000 to a 7-year-old, right? They can tell
Yeah.
you that they
Nothing.
know that it's a lot of money, but they don't really know whether
Mm-mm.
that is or isn't. They're just telling you that. So what he
Yep.
did was he converted all the dollars to gallons of milk, because that kid liked to drink milk like it was going out of style.
Okay.
Right. And so he would be like, well, okay, so we made $20,000 and a gallon of milk costs $1.50. So if we divide $1.50 into the 20,000, this is how many gallons of milk we just made. Now,
That's
because it's
smart.
a physical,
Mhm.
tangible thing that the kids could see,
Mm.
right? The kids would be like, oh my God, that's a lot of milk.
Yeah.
Right. And then they could start
Yep.
relating. And
That's really smart.
his daughter's 16 now and looking to get into the business, and
Yeah.
and so, but she's already financially trained on how to do it. So
Yeah.
I really like that, because that's been like I want to say, it's not really a fear, but it's more of like, how do I make sure that while our kids are seeing these numbers, that they understand that
Mhm.
the value of that, and like it's a lot, right? Like,
Yep.
and that's really cool. Like actually relating it to something tangible, you know, like, okay. I like that. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to use that or
Yeah, you can go to
something similar.
Legos
I
or
was just thinking Legos. I was like, my son
Barbies or
loves Legos.
yeah,
Me too.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Like we just bought 2,000 Lego sets is essentially what we could do with this.
Yeah.
It's incredible though too. Like, you know, seeing some of the younger folks out there. I just talked to a guy yesterday. I was on the phone with him, you know, talking about kind of, you know, some strategy stuff around real estate through Call Porter, and come to find out in the middle of the conversation, he's 19. He just graduated high school, you know, this previous May. And I was like, he's already done like 5 deals through the summer and through the fall. His mindset is absolutely unbelievable. And I was just like, dude, if I could go back in time when I was 19 years old, like I chose to do the military, I don't have any regrets. However, like to do what you're doing in learning sales and learning how to negotiate and learning how to be conversational with people is going to serve you for your entire life. And like, I was just, you know, the conversation like almost turned into this 19-year-old, you know, counseling me, you know, in a lot of ways. Like it was a really good conversation, but like, I love hearing that stuff. And you know, he obviously got a mindset early on from someone, right? I mean, we didn't get into the family stuff, but it's really cool to hear.
You know, what's funny is the first, talking about Rich Dad Poor Dad, because like that's literally every investor I talk to. That's the book they started with, right? And I think the big part of it is that like you think differently after you read it, right? Like there's the first time. So funny story, kind of sad story at the same time. Is first time I read that book, I was 19. And like the way my brain worked and thought about things at that time, when I found out it was a parable and he didn't actually have 2 dads, I was like, well, this is just bullshit. And like, I just like put the book down and never did anything with it again. And I'm like, man, if I would have understood what I was really reading at that point and like truly like grasping the value, like I don't know where things would be now, but it did kind of spark that like thinking about things differently. I always go back to his billboard example of like when he started buying billboards and I don't remember if it was Arizona or wherever it was, but you know, he talks about how he would do that. And like, I never even had the thought of who owns the billboard, right? Like just people are renting it, but never even thought about that. So it did put that spark in there, but I'm like, I don't have many regrets, but that's one where I'm like, damn, I really wish I would have like grasped the whole importance of that book at 19 when I first read it.
But I only have one really big regret when it comes to what I've done in real estate, and that's the fact that I missed my first deal because I was too afraid to do it. And the difference between when I had the opportunity to do the deal and when my wife told me I can do this was almost 8 years or 9 years between the two.
Oh, wow.
Because I was like 22 or 23 years old. And, you know, my parents had this friend that they knew through church. And I knew that he was retired. I knew he was like 40 years old. I knew in a way that he did real estate, but I didn't like I thought he was an agent or whatever. And I don't know, you know, I'd gotten to know him for probably a couple of years. And one day he offered me a triplex, seller finance, no money down. And I said no, because I was too afraid, because I was still broke, young, dumb, afraid, like, okay, oh my God, this is great. But like, what if a fridge breaks?
Yeah.
How the heck am I going to pay for the fridge? Like, I don't have $100 to pay for a fridge, right? Because that's what fridges were 20 years ago, it's 30 years ago now.
Yeah.
You know, like I was so afraid of getting stuck with paying a bill that I couldn't afford that I was like, no. And I ran away. And it's the one and only thing I've ever done in real estate that I truly regret, was that I said no to a really, really good deal.
Do you think we touched on it briefly earlier, but do you think the thing that like got you over that fear was working with that coach, or was there something else in there?
I think it was a combination of a couple of things, right? I mean, clearly I had self-doubt because I was scared to death of doing that. They say that, you know, for the most part, men's brains don't even really start to mature until after we're 25. So somewhere between 25 and 28 is when it finally clicks for us. Yep. So I'm still thinking like a child for the most part. I'm afraid of so much stuff because I don't know anything yet, even though, when you're young like that, you're also cocky because you think you can do anything in the world. It's kind of a weird
Yep.
state in time, right?
Yep.
But, you fast forward to my wife essentially saying, I think we could do this. And the fact that we had just gotten through this monstrous project of literally building a house from the ground up. And we self-generaled it. And when I say self-general it, I don't mean that we just sat and hired all the contractors and subs to do everything. We literally worked it, right? I mean, we helped with the framing. We helped with putting in the floor trusses. We helped with putting siding on and doing electrical and putting the roof on. And like, we literally were physically involved in almost everything that got done in that house. And so coming off of a big win, like building a house and managing to make my way through it, having a wife who was supportive and saying, no, we can do this. Like, cause she didn't say, even though it was really, you can do this, right? She always used the words we, like we could do this. And so you get that support and confidence behind you, and you've got someone you can count on. It still wasn't quite enough to really get me over the hurdle, which is why I needed the coach. But when you stack all those things together, that's why the moment when it clicked with the coach, it was like, really? This is what I've been afraid of.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Like, oh my God, like I seriously can do this, and you have that
I
big
psyched it up so
monster.
much more in my mind than it actually is.
Yep, exactly. So it's a combination of several things, but they all just lined up right. And it all took time for them all to come together. So it's not like 50 things hit me at once going, yoo-hoo, you got this. It's growth and the right people in the right places.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You started flipping a lot, after that. Were you involved in the process? Like, did you go to the houses and swing hammers and cut the wood and, want to touch the house and be tangible there as it's working through? Or did you slowly kind of get out of that process and just hire everything out?
Well, the good news for me is that I'm lazy, which, really is, I really focus on being more efficient. Right.
Same.
And so, yeah. And, so I had a full-time job at the time. I was in a management position, so I had a lot of responsibilities and a lot of commitments. So no, I really couldn't be at the houses, 24/7 working on stuff and helping out. My first round of houses that I bought, I partnered with my brother-in-law who has a construction background. And he was working a job in sales, but he was outside sales. So he had a very, very flexible time slot that he could kind of come and go from properties and slide in and out. And, so he was kind of helping me manage the contractors. So, again, by accident. So this isn't something like I instinctively knew, don't go swing a hammer, but we started out managing projects right from the get-go, just because of time constraints. And I know there's a lot of people that are in that same spot though, right? They got day jobs, working 50 hours a week, plus you got kids and family and other obligations. And they try to figure out how in the world can I do all this stuff? You're not supposed to do it all, right?
Yep.
That real estate investing, like if anyone takes anything away from this podcast, just take this one thing away. Real estate investing is a team sport, period. If you don't take this on as a team sport and you have that attitude of I have to do this and it's all about how much money I'm going to make and all your sentences have the word I in it, you're going to struggle for a really, really long time. It doesn't matter how many coaches you hire. It doesn't matter what groups you join. You got to get past that thing. I learned it by accident. It's not like anybody taught me that this was a team sport. I just figured it out of necessity because I didn't have the time. But I really, really wanted to do it. It's like, so how can I? So, I don't know if that's just my parents' upbringing of, the fact that we talked about money and everything is possible and all that kind of stuff. But that's how I just started in it. It's like, okay, I don't have time. Who do I know that can help me? Like, I don't care if I got to give up half the deal, that's fine. Just,
Yep. I'd rather give up half the deal than have none of the deal.
Well, so I have this weird saying, but it's really, really true. And I have been saying it a lot lately at the RIAs and other groups that I'm in. It's better to have half a watermelon than the whole grape, right? Fact
Yeah.
is, a slice of watermelon is still bigger than the whole grape.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So it isn't even about half. It's just get a piece of the deal. Don't worry about taking the whole thing. Just start working your way into the deals. Get a piece of them. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. Take it on as a team. You know, it's the fastest way to get there.
Yeah, that's gold, man. I love that.
Let me get a shirt that says that now. I'll send you one.
And yet 99% of our population won't understand what it means.
That's okay.
That's going to be the name of the podcast episode. That's the title.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
I want to switch gears kind of for a second here, because you are you okay to talk about what you put in here is like what you view as your superpower?
What did I write? I'm good with talking about it, but I don't remember.
Okay, I figured so. But so you wrote in here that you have autism.
Yep.
And most people look at it as a handicap, and you could do that with ADD, dyslexia, like depression, anxiety, whatever it is. But you choose to look at it as a superpower. So I'm curious, kind of like what you've noticed or how that's played into your business, your life, like growth. Because I think for a lot of people, whatever the perceived handicap might be, that people can kind of use that as not really a crutch, but like almost an excuse of like, well, this is why I can't do something. This is why I can't grow. This is why I can't be successful. So I'm really curious to hear kind of how that's had an impact in your life and in your business.
Well, so pretty much every single thing that you listed, I have, right?
Okay.
I have anxiety and depression. I have, I am on the spectrum. I have antisocial behaviors. I'm very awkward in social behaviors, even when I'm not being antisocial. I'm an introvert, which means that, generally speaking, all these conferences that I love to go to, they're filled with people. Introverts, people drain introverts, right? Extroverts get filled by it. Right?
It is draining going to events.
Yeah,
I'm like,
it
after
is.
the day, I want to just relax, but I force myself to go to hang out. But sorry.
So,
and I'm the exact opposite. I'm like, woohoo!
But it's like what I've kind of learned over the years, which I don't think I wrote this in my thing regarding my autism. I actually only found out that I was autistic at 53, and I'm 54. Okay. So it's only about a year old that I figured out that that's what it is. Now, when I got diagnosed, everything in life started to unravel. Like, oh my God, that's why I behave this way. That's why it is this way. My parents knew, they didn't know that I was autistic. Way back when there really wasn't a spectrum. If you were autistic, you were that kid that threw the violent physical temper tantrums and there was nothing else, right?
Yeah.
You were just a daydreamer who stared out the window, right? And people who are on the spectrum do tend to have multiple issues stacked on top of them, right? Like I also have a thing that's called ADP, or APD, which is audio processing disorder. So I have a short circuit in my brain that what my brain thinks I hear versus what I really hear isn't the same thing. And, it's kind of funny. It sucks, but it is also kind of funny because if you're driving in the car with me, I'm not going to sing the right words to the whole song. I'm going to start, right? And you always hear about all these misheard words and songs.
Lyrics.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have to be a difficult set of lyrics for me to misunderstand it. I just get the wrong answer.
Yeah.
It does make it a little awkward too if I'm in the middle of a conversation and somebody says something and then I'm like, huh? What? And unfortunately, that's usually how it comes out because I just get overwhelmed and whatever. But how's that a superpower? Well, because it gives you the opportunity to actually talk about the struggles. Because the reality is that it doesn't matter that I'm on the spectrum. It doesn't matter that I have ADHD. It doesn't matter that I have APD. It doesn't matter that sometimes I have OCD, right? None of these things matter. Because the reality is all kinds of people, whether you're on the spectrum or not, have issues. We all have personal hurdles and struggles to get through.
Yeah.
And, you know, the superpower is just realizing that these things give you the opportunity to communicate. And as an introvert, you know, I used to have the saying, I don't say this anymore because I'm trying to grow and be better than this, but I used to joke all the time. It's like, I like people, just not that much. Right. Because that's what it's like to be an introvert. You know, that's how you feel. It's like, yeah, I really like people. I just don't want to talk to them. Like, I don't want to go hang out with them unless it's like one person.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've also learned that, you know, there's more than just introverts and extroverts. Right. There's this other thing that's called being an ambivert, which means you can be both.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these things can be learned skills. And so, you know, me having a struggle with one thing caused me to learn how to do something else. So even though I'm naturally an introvert, I can be an extrovert. So when I go to the conferences and we're going to talk about stuff that I'm passionate about, I come right out of my shell and I can go all day and I don't get drained. You know, I actually become an extrovert and get rejuvenated by the ability to go do stuff. That's how you turn your introversion into extroversion. That's how you turn introversion into a superpower, right? The autism itself isn't necessarily the superpower. It's how do you take all these things that we all struggle with and just, how do you just use it a little bit different?
Yeah.
How do you use it as a tool to communicate? How do you, because if people understand where you're coming from, the conversations are completely different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't get, my wife doesn't get all that excited about me talking about being on the spectrum, but yet I talk about it all the time. And it's not because I'm looking for sympathy or empathy or any of that stuff, because I'm not. I use it as a way to say, hey, I have issues.
Yeah.
Right. And because these are, you know, societally, these are big issues. It's really easy to break the ice with people. It's really easy to talk about stuff and say, here's how I got over it. That's a superpower. Being able to just talk about it is a superpower. You know, this is what I do. This is all that stuff. It's really the process of just using it to do something different. That's what makes all of them superpowers.
That's such a great point.
You know, not hearing well. That's a hard one to be a superpower, but it kind of gets used as a superpower because then I go, oh my God, like you wouldn't believe what I actually just thought you said. And then you say it back to them and then everybody laughs and, you know, you make a joke of it. That is how you turn something that's awkward into something that's a superpower, because humor is how we connect easily with people. Right. And so I just make fun of the stuff that's wrong with me to connect.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it. And it's funny because I've dealt more with like probably in the last 10 years when it really started, but like had a lot of anxiety issues and then kind of had some depression issues and things like that. And, you know, it was something I had never dealt with, right? Like up until the point I was 26, I was like, it's all sunshine and rainbows. Like I'm happy, like there's nothing going on. And then like I started, you know, making bad decisions as I was in a management position and was drinking to deal with stress, and that just makes you more anxious and causes all these issues. And you know, it's funny that you said that, you know, when you're in the zone, you're really talking about something you're passionate, it's like it doesn't even matter, it's not even there. Right. And like it's very similar with me, like even doing this podcast or like getting on camera to record videos or speaking at events, like I used to just be a ball of anxiety right beforehand. And the thing that's funny that I noticed is like the first 2 minutes, like my voice would sound a little shaky. I would be a little anxious, like even if it's just a room of 50 people, right? Like, but it's like as soon as I like that like switch snaps where I'm in the zone talking about something I'm passionate about, something that I'm excited about, and I love helping people, it's like it's gone. Like I don't even notice that it's there anymore. But it's like for me, it was always like I got to get through like the 30 minutes before I talk, and then the first like 2 minutes, right? Like I just gotta get through that part. And for me, like repetition has what's really helped with that, right? Like the more podcasts I do, the more events I speak at, the more coaching I do with friends or clients or whatever, like that's what's really helped me. Like, not even now, like I do events every other month with my business coach and help him out on stuff. And it's one of those things that like it doesn't even register anymore. Like, I'm not anxious when I get there. Like, if it's a new group, there's still a little bit of anxiety there and a little bit of nervousness, right? But it's cool to see, like, once you're actually getting into the zone on whatever you're ready to talk about or help with or do, that anxiety, being an introvert, like all of that kind of stuff, it just kind of goes out the window when you're in that zone.
So I get asked to speak at conferences several times a year, and I no longer have an issue. I don't care if it's 10 people or 1,000 people. It makes no difference to me to get on stage, and I don't have the anxiety or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have to do this anymore, but when I very first started speaking, do you know how I got past all the anxiety? I flipped the script, exactly what I talked about with converting, being on the spectrum into a superpower. So instead of getting up on stage, a lot of times people would say, I'm really nervous, and they'll say, please forgive me. I'm a little nervous. I don't normally talk in front of large crowds. Don't do that. I would just say, okay. So, usually when a speaker gets up there, they can have some nerves and whatever else. My question for you guys is, how many of you are nervous about what I'm going to say? And then everybody starts to laugh. When the humor comes in, anxiety disappears almost instantly.
Yep.
Like in my intro where I talk about, because everybody's got to have one of those stupid intro slides all about me or whatever.
Yeah.
And I fly through mine really, really quick. But I have some grandkids, and in my intro, the way that I produced the PowerPoint slide is it says, I have X number of small terrorists or terrorists in training, depending on which version of the slide you see, right? And then I click the button, and then in parentheses right behind it says, AKA grandkids to those of you mere mortals, right? And of course, everybody starts laughing because they don't know what the heck small terrorists are. And I'm like, oh yeah, my life.
Everyone's like, where is this about to go?
Yeah, I got 8 small terrorists in training. And now, of course, I've flipped the script too, because I'm like, now the kids aren't in training anymore. They are absolutely full on terrorists now. I mean, they just mob me to death when they come over. And, and it's awesome. Right. But I usually just try to use humor and just say stupid things because, the truth is the funniest thing in the world you can ever say. That's why the comedians that are the funniest, they're all just speaking the truth.
Telling real stories of
they're telling real stories
they've done.
Yep. Stuff they do, stuff their family does, stuff their friends do, but they just tell real true stories. Now, they embellish a little bit because they got to put a little twist on, the way that they present it. But the stories are all true. And that's what makes them so damn funny, because we can all relate to the dumb stories.
Oh, yeah. That's funny. I've got a friend here locally who's a real estate investor, and he does stand-up comedy on the side. Like, that's his goal is like, I want to, real estate funds my passion. My passion is stand-up comedy. So like 6-7 nights a week, he's bouncing around clubs here in St. Louis doing stand-up and stuff. And he was like, you should come do an open mic night. I was like, there's not a chance in hell I'm doing an open mic night. And he's like, it's a lot easier than you think it is. He's like, literally all comedy is, most jokes that have ever been written is a benign like statement that everybody knows. It's the unexpected punchline that makes the joke, right? He's like, you could say whatever you want. He's like, and it could be something silly about how you put your shoes on or whatever. He's like, but where you get people to laugh is that unexpected punchline of like, oh, I didn't know this was going to take that turn. And that's where the comedy lies. And I was like, It's like, I like that.
Yeah, dude, my favorite comedian right now is Nate Bargatze. If you have not listened to him or watched him, dude, just all real stuff and just makes me belly laugh. Yeah.
Shane Gillis is my current favorite one. He's a little more raunchy than Nate Bargatze.
Yeah, but Nate's definitely not that, but yeah.
No, but dude, he's hysterical.
Yeah.
But yeah, and humor is how you connect at the RIAs too. It's not just about speaking on the stage. I mean, I learned to speak on the stage and use humor by learning to talk to people at the RIAs.
Yeah. I remember, I mean, humor can definitely bring the walls down on a lot of things. I remember um, visiting a house that I was interested in buying, and the lady was a widow, and her husband was a previous fireman, and she had he was so recently passed away that his hospital bed was still in the room, like one of the rooms, right, from hospice. And I got into one of the living rooms, and there was just this whole like display of his medals and his gear and all kinds of stuff, and there was a hat. And in order, like, she's the one who broke the ice. She put the fireman hat on my head. She's like, try this on, and just taking a moment that, I'm like, I'm so sorry for your loss. This is something that was a little bit more just kind of somber. She put this hat on my head, and I was wearing his gear and stuff, and it just, the whole entire rest of viewing the home and talking about him and talking about the needs, that all just was super easy just because of that humor element of just plopping that fireman's hat on my head. So it's definitely something, just as human beings, that just brings us together and brings that, that relationship into fruition.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I wanted to touch on like one other, probably one, this might be the last thing. I'm not sure. We'll see how the next portion of this goes here. But, you said one thing that you like to coach people on is things that most gurus skip over. You like to fill those gaps, right? So in my experience, like, as good intentioned as most gurus can be, there are things that are missed, right? That can be important parts to the formula. So for you, like someone, because one of the things we like to try and talk about on this is how we can help people get the next deal, right? So somebody who's new, who's kind of getting started, what's one of those gaps that you see that you consistently work with people on or teach people about that can help them, narrow and shorten that time to get that next deal?
Yeah. So there's really two areas that I sit and try to focus on the most for filling gaps. Right now, the whole creative finance, right, particularly sub two, is like all the rage across the internet, right? Because interest rates are higher. And so it's harder to buy a house and go get it financed yourself. So if you can buy it sub two at the older, cheaper interest rates, right, super advantageous to us to do.
Yeah.
The problem is that gurus in general like to sell the sexy, right? They don't necessarily, we were talking about humor, right? Humor is funny because it's the truth. But see, the truth isn't sexy though, when you're talking about education, learning, how to do something right, morally, ethically, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so they tend to skip over the things that people really need to know, and they build false senses of security into things that ultimately people screw up and get themselves into legal trouble with. And that's where, to me, those gaps got to get filled. So like when you look at the sub two world, constantly I hear all kinds of stories about, if you use a land trust because it's for estate planning purposes, the banks can't call it due. That's a totally false statement. Because if you read the Garn-St. Germain Act, yes, it does say that the homeowner can use a revocable trust, like a living trust or land trust, whatever they want, for estate planning purposes, and the bank can't call it due. But it also says in there that the owner must still reside in the house and they must still be the owner, which means when you look at the trust, that means who's the beneficial interest, right?
Yeah.
If you just look at how things really, really work. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do sub two. So I'm not trying to trash on sub two. I'm trying to point out the fact that there are things that are taught incorrectly because we need to have the right knowledge to do it right. Because, one of the other things with sub two is I'm going to wholesale that sub two, right? I'm going to sell it to somebody else, which is a massively morally and unethical thing to do to the homeowner, because you're positioning the homeowner with a promise that you made that someone else isn't going to fulfill because they didn't make that promise, right? And they may fulfill the promise, but if they don't
They
know the homeowner. They have nothing. And
Yeah.
so it gets right. And so we skip over and we gloss over the situations and the results and the consequences, and we focus strictly on the money that I can make, right? That's what they're selling, the sexy. The sexy is greed. How many times can I push your greed button to get you to write a check, to buy a course, to buy my coaching, to buy whatever, so I can get you in the door?
Yeah.
Because it is really difficult to hold the coach responsible for what they teach, because they're not the ones that actually perpetrate whatever's wrong, right? The other
Yeah.
thing I really like focusing on, because it's another big hot issue out there, is private lending. You know, go become a lender, go do this, start supplying earnest money deposits and all that kind of stuff. Well, first of all, earnest money deposits, that's not a loan. Not the way that
No.
it's being taught, not the way that it's being structured. That's being done as a joint venture. I went and purchased all the contracts and all the stuff, and I've read through it, and I got friends who are attorneys in high places, and I've had them look at the stuff that I bought just so that I could understand it. And there's all kinds of mistaught information in that world. There are tons and tons of people that are doing these things and losing 100% of their money because they don't know any better, because they were told it was one way and then it doesn't work that way and they lose their money. So I'm trying to help fill the gap of answering those kind of questions and saying, listen, I'm not against giving somebody earnest money deposit. Like, I'm not against it. I'm not against lending somebody on a flip as a hard money loan. I'm not against sub two. I'm not against any of those things. It's, we need to fill the gap so that people understand how to do it right, because there's going to come a day where the government's going to come knocking, because during sub twos, we constantly commit mortgage fraud and a lot of things, because when you do things to deceive the bank, that's mortgage fraud. And burying things inside of a land trust and doing things deceptively the way that we do and that we're taught it is mortgage fraud. Now, are the banks going to do anything about it? Probably not anytime soon, but it's now being taught so rampant. I mean, it's just so everywhere.
Yeah.
Are they going to do it? Are they going to come after someone and make an example of them? That's a high likelihood, right?
Well, yeah, and you can make the same argument for like when pushing text message marketing was really popular a couple of years ago, and it's like it works, but not without consequences if you don't do it right.
Correct.
Like I've probably met 10, 15 people that have had to pay $60,000 plus as settlements because of the amount of texting they were doing. And like, I even know a guy that I don't agree with it, but he bakes it into his business. Like, I know I'm going to have to pay this amount of settlements, and it's just part of my cost of doing business. I don't agree with the way he's doing it, but there's so many other people that might be getting started. And it's like the amount of text messages you can send out that quickly. If someone's smart on the receiving end, like that can come back to bite you real quick. And a lot of people just kind of skipped over that part. So yeah, pretty similar.
Yeah. And most people don't have that kind of stuff baked into their business model, right? They're not big enough. They don't have enough cash flow and reserves. They don't have enough revenue that the process is generating to not care. I mean, casinos are famous for that. Exactly what this guy's business model is. There are laws in place that say slot machines have to pay X% of money out, right? Through jackpots and other things. They have to pay it. They have to have a certain payout, and they are monitored by the state, except the fine is small enough compared to what they make by rigging the machines that it's very common to have the machines rigged. Does it happen to every machine? No, of course not. But do they do some? Sure, they get caught all the time. Never makes the news. Nobody knows about it. It's the same thing for all the text messaging violations. There's tons of people getting tagged for text messaging violations. There are all kinds of coaches that are getting tagged by the FTC for the way that they're collecting reviews and testimonials, right? I mean, there's all these things that nobody talks about because it's not sexy. And it gets us into trouble by not talking and teaching on it.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not to scare people away from doing these things at all, because there's
No,
absolutely the right way to do it and an
correct.
ethical way to
Yeah.
do it and a way to protect yourself, but it's understanding the ins and outs of it.
Right.
Like there's certain things that, I not to like have it come down to like analysis paralysis, but it's like once you understand to make sure you're doing things through the right process, like novations is another good way to kind of look
Hmm.
at it too. Like
Yep.
there's an absolutely wrong way to do innovation and get in a lot of trouble if you don't do it right. But there's also a
Yes.
way to do it in an ethical, proper way to make sure it's
Yeah.
done correctly, and it's knowing that difference.
Yep. Yeah. And, so again, just like you just said, I'm not against anybody doing any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I still do a lot of it. It's just, I do it in ways that keep me above board, keeps me clean. Ultimately, the seller of the house, when you do whatever you're negotiating with, they actually appreciate the transparency. They appreciate you keeping them in the loop. They appreciate the fact that because you're disclosing these things to them, that you are also putting mechanisms in place, not just to protect yourself, but to also protect them, because there are
Mhm.
ways to do it where it really actually increases the benefits to both sides.
Yeah.
So, you know, short of coercion, you know, it's a good deal when both sides are in agreement. And when one side is manipulative or lying or not providing full disclosure, that kind of is coercion, right? And you're sort of cheating the seller. And
Yeah.
does it work? Sure. Um, there's
But
lots
long
of things.
term, that's what's going to cause more issues for this
Yes,
industry in general.
yeah, long term, you were just asking for more legislation, more
Yep.
regulations to lock us down and limit what we can do.
Yep.
By cutting the corners, we're all just shooting ourselves in the foot, just to make a buck today. I'd rather
Yeah.
make a buck today and tomorrow.
Right.
I want to do it forever.
Want this to be sustainable long
Yeah,
term.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's exactly
there's
what
a
it's about.
reason why on the retail side, there's now the realtor associations and the laws and everything that go into what what's the difference between a realtor and an agent, right? The realtor
Yeah.
are abiding by a certain amount of standards and rules,
Hmm.
and then in the real estate investment world, there's really not that much, as far as what's guarding people and safekeeping them. So I think, yeah, it's tough. Like to people need to work in a more ethical way, and the greed, the money, the social media fame, or if they're a guru, just gets to them so quickly, and it's very off-putting in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, because I get it, right? We all need money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you can take the shortcut and you make a couple extra bucks today, everybody wants the easiest, fastest path to cash. We
Hmm.
all want instant gratification,
Yeah.
but the problem is that there's a price to pay with all of it. And
Yeah.
it is unfortunate and it sucks, but the good news is there are right ways to do it. And
Yeah.
they're just small, subtle tweaks in most cases. Just a little
Yep.
bit of understanding and one minor small tweak, and you are golden.
And
And
it's wild
man,
too, because it literally is a small little
yeah,
difference, right? On
yep,
a document or a contract or whatever
yep,
it is. Like there's just something, just a little bit, it's same like it's kind of a little bit different, but like in marketing, it's similar. It's like
mhm,
little tweaks, just little
yep,
small tweaks to stuff completely changes the outcome. So
yeah.
yeah.
That's really what it's all about in trying to help people get the questions answered and just help them in ways and give them the clarity and the answers that they really need. That unfortunately, the real estate industry and the gurus have just left.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's another one that bugs me too. I haven't figured out how in the world to deal with this one yet, but you know everybody's buying houses and selling them to the hedge funds, which is
Yeah.
continuing to contribute to the housing problem that we have. I understand why they do it.
Yeah.
Financially it makes sense to do, but you're pulling houses off the market and we can't build them fast enough.
Yeah.
So it's a lopsided trade. We make a buck, but down the road, that house is never coming back. You
Yeah.
know, and again, I get it. It's easy money. And
That's
I
a
like,
hard one.
yeah, I like easy money too, but
Yeah.
I also don't want to pay the price down the road for my kids and grandkids,
Yeah.
you know?
I think we've only sold maybe one house to a hedge fund over the last couple years, and it was just like one that couldn't move, because we've always had that
Mhm.
kind of same thought in the back of our head, is like, I don't want to build a business that relies strictly on hedge funds that could change their mind on what they're going to buy in a given moment, right? Like that we saw
And they
that
have.
happen over the last year, right?
Yep.
Like markets closing down of where they weren't buying anymore, prices were lower. Like, so I saw a lot of people that were like, I have all this inventory and I don't know what to do with it now, and it forces you to kind of change. But
Mhm.
that's always been kind of in the back of my mind too, of like, it's not sustainable long
Yeah.
term for me, but also for them and
Yeah.
just housing in general. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point.
And if anybody's doubting how fast hedge funds can change their mind, let's just go back 2 years, 3 years. Let's go
Hmm.
back to the start of COVID. I don't know
Yep.
if anybody remembers, but I personally distinctly remember, because I was I was on one of the last cruise ships that made it into port before COVID had everything shut down. So it was
Oh,
a
okay.
fairly traumatic experience in going through it that way. But the week after that COVID hit, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, 23 hedge funds shut their doors. They didn't
Mm.
go out of business. They just shut their doors and said no new business. And these 23 hedge funds were buying all the mortgages and notes that all the hard money lenders were creating to get people financing.
Yeah.
So when all that shut down because the hedge funds got scared and decided to protect themselves, they literally shut down the entire industry. There were very, very few of us that were lenders that walked through that thing unscathed.
Mm.
I happen to be one of the blessed ones because I've never dealt with the hedge funds, because I don't like the way that they do business. And we've always
Yeah.
done it with private people as our funding source instead of looking to sell the paper to the hedge funds.
Mm. That makes a
But
lot of sense. Yeah.
that's the consequences that just happen. And most of us, it's unfortunate. My own kids do this sometimes too, as I'm sure everybody's kids do. They don't have the same experiences that we do.
Hmm.
Uh, you don't really know that there is a consequence.
Yeah.
And so you pick based on what you know. And the problem is that we don't go to the right places and ask the right questions. We just make a decision because we think it's good. And you know, 6 months, a year, 2 years later, 5 years later, you can't, it's too far down the road. You can't connect them anymore personally.
Yeah.
But
Can't undo it either.
yeah, and you can't undo it. But now you're in a new rock in a hard place and still struggling. And
Yep.
real estate's a pretty easy sport. I mean, I'm sure you guys would do. I mean, it's pretty simple to do. It's not, most of it's not rocket science. I mean, it is
Hmm.
work, which that part's not easy,
Yeah.
but it's not a rocket science industry.
Yeah.
Just
It's like, I've heard people say it's like the hardest easy thing you can do.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
depending on how you look at it, or what your thought is, but it's really, it's a formula that you can follow, that's
Correct.
repeatable, it's scalable,
Yeah.
and the process is there. It's all the in between stuff where people make it hard.
Hmm. Yes. Yep. Most of it's between our ears. That's the problem.
I was about to say most of it's up here.
Mhm. Yeah. Most of the problem is
back,
between our ears.
back to the
But
coaches. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
I definitely appreciate you doing this today, Jeff. And I know you've got like a new Facebook group, things like that. So you want to talk about that for a second, and how people can kind of reach you and join that group and learn a little bit
Yeah.
more about the stuff we've been talking about?
Yeah. So a real brief story of why I started the group.
Yeah.
Yes, I love to give back. Yes, I want to fill the gaps for people. And this started about 2.5, 3 months ago. I was actually, because I like to jump onto Facebook in the evening and I like to bounce in and out of different Facebook groups. And usually when I scroll through there, everybody's looking for answers and stuff. I'm usually looking for people who make posts that have very few comments on them. The ones that have a ton of comments on it, one of two things exists. It's either already been answered for them, or there's a fight going on in there and everybody's disagreeing. And so
Say everyone's arguing about something.
and so I don't want to participate in
Yeah.
those types of things. So I look for the posts that nobody's responding to, because that's the guy that actually needs the help, right? Because the other ones, they got more than they bargained for.
Yeah.
So I was sitting in a Facebook group one night and I'm answering questions about some sub 2 stuff. And this guy, it's kind of crazy because this Facebook post almost turned into like a live text stream because within 10 minutes of me starting this thing, that's how fast everybody's responding. It's literally like a live chat, right? And so, but we get about 15 to 20 minutes into this whole conversation about sub 2, what to do, how to do it, what are the gotchas. And this guy's like, dude, you're like one of the smartest people I've ever met on this topic. You need to start coaching people. And then I said, you know what, guys, you don't understand what it's actually like to be a coach. Because I used to do one-on-one coaching and mentoring and stuff for people. And when I did it, it became super overwhelming, super fast. Because a lot of times when you do the one-on-one coaching programs, people think that they own you 24/7. And so I'm typing all this stuff up for everybody and giving them all just the raw truth from behind the scenes of what it's like to be a coach and mentor. Yeah. And the more that I said no, the more people start jumping in, going, dude, you got to coach. You need to change your mind. That night, 53 people sent me DMs and said, you need to coach.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? It was kind of overwhelming. And I'm like, okay, no. And I blew everybody off. Fast forward a couple of days, I'm sitting in bed again, typing away, answering questions again. And my wife likes to ask questions every once in a while, like, hey, what are you working on? Like, what kind of questions are you answering? So I start telling her, I said, hey, the craziest thing happened to me the other day. And so I tell her about all these people. And my wife told me I was an idiot. And she said, right? Because that's what wives will do. They're like, you're an idiot. And I'm like, what? Yep. How am I an idiot? And she's like, all these people reached out to you and asked you for help, which is the thing you love to do the most, is help people. And you said no. What is wrong with you? And I'm like, well, I don't want to do it this way. She said, who said you had to do it the way that you did it before?
That's a good point.
Right? So she makes this great point. And so I decided that I was going to start a free Facebook group called My REI Coach, where people could come and just ask coaching type questions. Completely free. There's no fee or anything like that to get into the group. It's just a place for investors to come and ask questions and just get the raw, honest truth. I had no idea how big the need was for this group until I actually started it. I mean, I knew that the 53 people needed some help, but I didn't realize just how far it goes beyond those 53. Because in the first 3 weeks that we had it live, 1,000 people joined. Because the people who joined the group were then starting to invite their friends, going, oh my God, this is an awesome group. There's no sales, there's no pitching. We don't even allow people to post properties that they have for sale. Like, there's plenty of Facebook groups to go sell your stuff on. Yep. This is a place strictly for coaching. So that's what I put together. That's my place for giving back to everybody. I still hop into other Facebook groups occasionally. Every once in a while, somebody jumps in and tells me that I'm wrong because there's something specific about their state that's unique that I didn't know, which is fine. Yeah. But the object is to try to get people, the right answer, and to try to get them the help that they need so that we can all be successful. I'm super happy if people end up getting to know each other personally. I'm super excited if people start to partner up. That would be awesome. I don't care if people want to lend money to each other, as long as we all do it right. I'm super high on everybody just coming here to just get this, the straight scoop on stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
those are my favorite groups. Like I don't like being in sales groups. I don't like being in, put your email in to be added to my cash buyers list groups, things like that. It's where the true value comes in, is just there to help people. So I love that you're doing that. I'm going to join it here later today, because I'm sure I'll have questions for you at some point.
Yeah. And we've literally, you can pretty much name a topic from, commercial to apartment complexes to lending to sub to, all the questions are being asked. There's quite a few people that are in the group that are friends of mine, and it won't take you long to figure out who they are, because they're also the ones that are giving back the most as well.
Yeah.
because the mission is just so clear and it's so focused. We've done a really good job. Strangely enough, I've only had to actually eject one person so far.
It's not bad out of 1,000.
No, that's what I thought. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed that, he made his way into the group, because he wasn't even in the group for 30 seconds and was already just spamming the crap out of it. And we just cleaned it up and got rid of him and said, sayonara, you're not good for the group and good for the people.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Yeah. Very, very cool that you guys are doing that. And it's called My REI Coach. Is that what you said?
Yep. My REI Coach.
Awesome. So if you guys go and join that, I'm sure you'll get tons of value out of it. I know I'm going to join it, ask some questions in there as they come up. But Jeff, I really appreciate you hopping on. This was a very, very good call. I think this will be a good episode for people. Lots of value. So thanks for coming on. It's been great to finally meet you in person. I know we've been friends on Facebook for a while and never really actually met before. So it's great to finally meet you, man, and hope you have a wonderful weekend and holiday season, man.
Yeah, likewise. Same to you. Merry Christmas.
All right.
And hopefully people will join the group, because, it's like I said, it's really there as a tool to help people, not anything else beyond that. So come hang out. A lot of fun.
I think people will join because that's something that people gravitate to. So we'll send it out to all of our lists and everything too for people when the episode goes out. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And for everyone listening, again, like and subscribe, share it, get the word out there. This is a lot of fun for us to do, and we're going to keep doing it as long as the value is out there and we have fun, interesting guests like Jeff to come on and talk about it. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.